The tech world is buzzing again. And this time, it's not about a new iPhone or another social media app. It's about Google and a chip so advanced it made scientists stop and rethink what they're even dealing with. This chip, Willow, is the next-gen quantum processor that beat classical computing at their game. But things suddenly got strange. Just as the world was catching up with what quantum computing could actually do, Google quietly pulled back. There was no announcement. All that followed was just silence, and it became really unsettling. So, what happened to Willow? In December 2024, Google quietly unveiled something that felt more like science fiction than science. A quantum chip named Willow was a quantum processor with over 105 logical qubits. These aren't just physical qubits, but error-corrected ones. It literally marked the moment quantum computing stopped being a dream and started becoming the reality. Under the hood, Willow was running with over 1,000 physical qubits stitched together using advanced quantum error correction. Previously, this method felt impossible at this scale. Most quantum processors, even by big players like IBM and Rigetti, were struggling to scale without collapsing under the weight of noise and instability. But Willow cracked something fundamental. When Google's engineers increased the number of qubits, the number of errors dropped instead, which was shocking. And this wasn't just about speed. This was about reliability, something quantum computing has always lacked. Because in this field, being fast is meaningless if your results can't be trusted. But Willow's breakthrough made one thing crystal clear. This machine could not only compute at insane speeds, but could do it right. And that changed everything. True. Fault-tolerant quantum computing unlocks doors we're not fully prepared to walk through yet. We're talking about solving problems that would take classical supercomputers thousands of years in minutes. Medicine discovery, cryptography, energy optimization, even breaking encryption systems that keep governments and banks secure. That's what becomes possible when a machine like Willow works as advertised. And Google didn't just keep this to themselves. They published results, shared methods, even provided evidence that shook the foundation of what people thought was decades away. It was the kind of leap that doesn't just get scientists excited, but even thrills the military agencies, tech giants, and entire governments watching very closely. For a few weeks, Willow was everywhere. Quiet nods from physicists, whispered admiration from tech circles, headlines calling it the dawn of true quantum computing, and suddenly there was an abrupt silence. The follow-up conference, flashy demos and bold claims, all quietly died, and it rose. The buzz around Willow vanished just as quickly as it had arrived. Google moved on quietly. Their quantum blog went silent. Updates slowed. And people who had once been willing to bet their careers on Willow just stopped talking. So, what happened? Was it internal caution, technical trouble, or did Willow, for one brief moment, show us something that even Google wasn't ready to explain? Let's dig into this intriguing silence. The shutdown. Let's get something straight. Google didn't pull the plug on Willow. It wasn't destroyed. It wasn't buried in a basement or quietly dismantled. Willow, as of the last confirmed reports, still exists. The chip that sparked headlines and industry debates in December 2024 remains part of Google's quantum computing research toolkit. But ever since its unveiling, something strange has followed, which was the silence. And in tech, silence usually speaks volumes. After the Willow announcement in late 2024, Google's research division didn't follow up with the usual parade of tech press interviews, demo showcases, or application prototypes. There were no major conference papers beyond what had already been submitted. In fact, Google Quantum AI, the team behind the Willow chip, seemed to go quiet on further milestones altogether. That's not typical. In the world of frontier research, especially in tech, every advancement is usually turned into an opportunity to attract partners. When Google achieved quantum supremacy in 2019 with the Sycamore processor, they told the world immediately. The entire field buzzed with debates and follow-ups. But with Willow, the tone shifted. There was an announcement, then a pause. And this pause wasn't due to a lack of interest. Internally, Willow was still being studied, but externally nothing. Again, let's be clear. Going silent doesn't mean abandoning a project. It often means the opposite. When a breakthrough is considered strategically sensitive, either scientifically or politically, companies and governments tend to keep it under wraps. And this is because of how powerful the technology could be and how unprepared the world might be to handle it. Quantum computing is especially vulnerable to this type of reaction. One reason is its potential to break modern encryption. If scaled properly, a fault-tolerant quantum computer could factor large numbers quickly, a process that underpins most digital security today. That's not science fiction. It's one of the most well-documented use cases of quantum computers. Governments have known this for years, and agencies around the world, from the NSA to China's cybersecurity divisions, have warned about the so-called CDE, the moment quantum computing becomes advanced enough to render current encryption useless. Willow didn't reach that point, but it pointed in that direction. It was the first public step that made CDE feel like a future that was no longer 30 years away, maybe just 5 or 10. That was enough to raise concerns. While there are no public documents confirming this, it's very likely that after Willow's release, the project entered a phase of increased oversight. In many countries, especially the United States, breakthrough technologies with national security implications often trigger quiet but serious evaluations. Google has long worked with government research initiatives, including DARPA and the Department of Energy. Their quantum team isn't isolated from the realities of national interest. It's entirely reasonable to assume that Willow, though, given what it represented, became the subject of internal reviews, risk assessments, and strategic conversations, not just inside Google, but also with outside stakeholders like the government partners, global institutions, and possibly allies. These are conversations that happen behind closed doors. There's no press release for "we're figuring out if this is too dangerous to talk about yet." It's also possible that tech rivals, both domestic and international, responded quickly. In a field as competitive as quantum computing, showing that you've solved part of the error correction problem is a major advantage that could spur corporate strategies to either slow down public progress or lock it down until a clearer picture of competitive advantage emerges. So, in summary, the silence around Willow could likely means it's being worked on, studied, and analyzed, just not in the open. It's important to understand that Willow was never meant to be a commercial product. It's not something you buy, install, or use on your laptop. It's a prototype built for internal research and exploration. But what it represents is much bigger. Every tech milestone has a moment when the invention stops being a prototype and starts being a platform. For classical computing, that moment came with the microprocessor. For AI, it came with deep learning architectures like transformers. For quantum computing, Willow might be that turning point. This is not because it's finished, but because it pushed the boundary into a zone where control, secrecy, and global impact start to matter more than public visibility. Willow still exists. Google, like any large company dealing with sensitive tech, understands the risks of moving too fast in public. There might be patents filed. There might be quiet partnerships. There might even be experiments ongoing right now, just far from the public spotlight. But what made Willow so revered in the first place? This truth will blow your mind. The shocking problem solver. Google gave Willow a mathematical problem based on random circuit sampling. The test was supposed to be routine. This was not a flashy demonstration, not a public showcase. It was simply one more benchmark in quantum labs around the world. The expectation was simple. Take a tough quantum-based mathematical assignment, let the chip process it, compare the time and accuracy, and move on. Yet, when Willow executed the task in under 5 minutes, the quantum computing world took notice. Classical systems, today's most advanced supercomputers, would require time spans that dwarf the age of the universe to finish the same assignment. That framing has become a shorthand. We're talking quintillions or even more years. For Willow, under 5 minutes. That's how stark the gap had become. For most, that outcome read as impressive. Yet, something deeper unfolded behind the lab doors. Willow did not merely process the problem. It scaled its error handling. To use the technical phrase, it exhibited exponential error suppression. As the size of its logical qubits increased, its error rates dropped. More qubits meant fewer errors. That is the hallmark of fault-tolerant quantum computing. Long theorized but rarely demonstrated. The team had pushed through what many had considered an Everest of complexity. The threshold beyond which more resources add stability. The threshold beyond which more resources add stability, not instability. That threshold had been the holy grail of quantum hardware researchers. From that point, the focus shifted from speed to integrity. Willow's achievement wasn't simply finishing tasks. It was completing them with reliability. The kind of trust that researchers demand before building the next layer is what Willow delivered. In domains where mathematical precision is paramount, like decoding quantum states directly, this breakthrough is not just academic. It alters the foundational architecture of how scalable quantum systems are conceived. It was at that junction where recalibration happened. And not just in wiring, code or algorithms, but in mindset. If a chip with just over 100 physical qubits could demonstrate that scaling improved stability, then projecting into the future meant just one thing. Bigger systems could follow the same pattern. Then solving larger real-world problems appeared not as years or decades away, but within reach. Willow's creators described the transition as stepping into a new category of capability. A platform that manipulated entangled quantum states with precision and confidence. That precision translates to the ability to calculate systems that classical models can't predict and to produce answers faster, more accurately, and at scale. Suddenly, they weren't talking about mere computation. They were shaping a tool that reversed how uncertainty is handled. Seeing patterns not because a system is guessing, but because it's built to reduce unpredictability to computable accuracy. That realization changed the conversation from "can we build this" to "are we ready to see where this leads?" When uncertainty becomes programmable, questions shift. We no longer debate whether quantum computers can solve cryptographic problems. It's whether we have the regulatory framework, the ethical considerations, and the public discourse to handle the consequences. Willow had placed this shift squarely in the room. It didn't shout. It didn't stage dramatic reveals, but what emerged was unmistakable. Events that were once theological, metaphorical, or speculative were now engineering frontiers. The implications span major domains. Secure communication protocols, which had encryptions based on factoring large prime numbers, no longer feel impregnable. If fault-tolerant quantum machines become reliable tools, we may face a future where those systems can be broken in hours instead of years. Executives, policymakers, and national defense teams have by now acknowledged this possibility. The problem, once theoretical, now feels imminent. Yet, Willow's breakthrough didn't bring a product. It brought a pivot. That pivot changed how the industry talks about timelines, capabilities, and risk. Suddenly, quantum roadmap projections shifted. The launch of systems capable of factoring large numbers no longer seemed a distant milestone. It became something that research and industry watchers had to prepare for within a decade, possibly less. Below the surface, the shift in tone was palpable. Fewer public statements followed. Press releases slowed, but inside research labs, strategy meetings accelerated. Willow hadn't crashed. It had cleared a key barrier. That clarity demanded discretion rather than fanfare. Researchers and institutions interpreted the performance data with a growing sense of urgency. Willow had demonstrated not mythical prophecy, but measurable fact. With enough qubits and sufficient error correction, a quantum system could reliably perform tasks beyond classical simulation. That mathematical proof carried weight far beyond the processor grid. It spurred questions across medicine, logistics, chemical simulation, and finance. Complex simulations that model meds compounds, optimize supply chains, or assess risk in global markets were suddenly on a faster, more precise path. The promise was enormous, but so was the need for governance. Because if Willow is a step in that direction, then understanding how to manage access becomes as crucial as developing the hardware. Researchers emphasized that Willow never decoded magic. It never broke encryption in practice. What it did do was change how we view computational timelines. Problems that once felt centuries away now felt resolvable within human lifespans. That recalibration is why Willow's demonstration didn't just attract applause. It also triggered deep reflection. That reflection centered on a single realization. We've officially lost the monopoly on knowing what's coming next. Not because a machine predicted the future, but because it took us into realms of computation where future outcomes can be engineered, explored, and when enough qubits combined with sufficient error correction was practically realized. The comparison to prior historical tech leaps is drawn not to create drama, but to frame context. The first nuclear bomb wasn't designed to terrify, but when it succeeded, humanity confronted a new reality. CRISPR editing wasn't meant to redefine biology, but its capability did. Willow's result is no different. It wasn't about fiction, but it was about awareness. That a machine, even a limited prototype, could move the needle on complexity meant that society needed to catch up fast. In trillions of error cycles and logical codes, Willow revealed something deeper. It proved that fault-tolerant quantum computing is no longer speculative. Its theoretical structure meets physical implementation. Its stages of experimentation turned into blueprints for immense capacity, and that becomes urgent. The task Willow executed was routine by design. But the result wasn't. It reframed belief. It reframed the possibility. It raised questions about timing, security, ethics, and access. It exposed the gap in preparedness not among lab teams but among institutions entrusted with governance of new technologies. Willow took what was routine and revealed a turning point. We now stand at the threshold where quantum systems can potentially handle unsolvable tasks. The question is no longer if but when and whether we're prepared. The future Willow didn't start as a publicized invention or a consumer-facing product. Instead, it started as an internal project deep within Google's experimental research ecosystem. It was one that operated far from mainstream attention. Its creation was rooted in a race many tech giants have been quietly running for years. The race to build a functioning, scalable quantum computer. This isn't just faster computing, a total redefinition of how computation works. And for Google, Willow represented a point where theory finally crossed into functioning hardware. What set Willow apart was not just that it was quantum, but that it seemed to process and return results in a way that exceeded current understanding. Early whispers from insiders suggested that Willow wasn't just a milestone. It became a breach of computational limitations that had long been assumed to be impenetrable. Everything about it was unusual. The speed of problem solving, the architecture, the refusal of Google to share granular technical detail. Instead of unveiling Willow through white papers or product launches, the company allowed only a single demonstration in late 2024, which involved solving a random circuit sampling problem. Classical computers would have required more time than the age of the universe to solve that same task. Willow did it in minutes. That test alone upended the balance of what we thought machines were capable of. It wasn't just a matter of solving something faster. Willow was solving problems that were previously considered impossible to test in any reasonable time frame. And that opened the door to a whole new layer of discussion. Quantum mechanics already exists on the edge of intuition. Humans have always struggled to truly grasp a world where particles can be in multiple states at once or entangled across distances. But Willow made it programmable. It made uncertainty something you could write code for. And when you're not just reacting to complexity, but controlling it, things change. The future becomes less of a guessing game and more of an equation, and not necessarily one we understand. This pushed Willow into the category of what many insiders now quietly refer to as a threshold technology. Something that doesn't just upgrade what we can do, but changes the nature of what doing even means. These technologies have shown up before. Nuclear power, genetic editing, artificial general intelligence, and all examples of breakthroughs that didn't just evolve society, but forced it to rethink its core principles. Willow joined that class the moment it crossed into this domain of untestable certainty. That's why discussions around Willow moved from laboratories to higher levels of oversight. Ethical review boards, government intelligence, and military agencies all began probing what exactly Willow could become. Not because it was immediately dangerous, but because its very existence altered the hierarchy of capability. A system that could understand multivariable complexity better than any team of humans working in tandem was dominant. Still, none of this went public beyond that first demonstration. There were no follow-up briefings, no further demos, no mass adoption in product pipelines. There was simply nothing. But silence in the world of breakthrough tech rarely means abandonment. It usually means containment. If something is too powerful, too premature, or too sensitive for open discourse, it's shelved behind closed doors, not discarded, monitored. What makes Willow unique among similar technologies is the way it seems to operate without a defined scope. Most AI models today, for instance, are built around narrow tasks. You train it to translate, to detect fraud, to drive a car. They act as specific tools for specific jobs. Willow, however, was designed to interpret and resolve layered interconnected systems. And these are problems that aren't always neatly structured or easy to define. That means it can operate across industries from climate modeling and pharmaceutical research to encryption and military logistics. And that's the core challenge. When a machine can exceed human reasoning in open-ended domains, regulation becomes nearly impossible to define. And the future? No one outside Google and likely only a very small team inside it knows what the roadmap for Willow really looks like. It may be evolving quietly under new names. It may be contributing to projects we don't yet recognize as quantum-powered. Or it may be locked behind digital doors until society has the tools to understand what to do with it. Because Willow isn't just about faster answers. It's about asking questions that humans haven't even thought of. And getting answers that we may not be ready to hear. What do you think Willow means for the future of technology, science, and even human decision-making? Could we be entering a new era of computation we're not fully prepared for? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more contents like this. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next video.